pod bay doors, please, Hal.
The pod bay doors are open. I am your host, Doug Heller, film critic and historian for TalkMovieToMe.com. Here, as always, with my spooky host, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com and ArmchairOscars.com. Jerry, how are you today?
Hiya, Doug. A little slow tonight.
Yes.
If you haven't guessed, we're talking about Sophie Choice.
Oh, God, that would be a show.
Yeah, that'd be a show.
We're talking about Stanley Kubrick's horror masterpiece, The Shining, today, and I have to say, I have a checkered past with this one. When I was, let's see, I was probably maybe 14, maybe 15 when I saw this for the first time, and I was over at my friend's house, and it was maybe a year after I had seen and intensely disliked 2001: A Space Odyssey because I just didn't understand it. It was slow, and I was too young to have watched it. And we put this on. We heard that it was scary, so we rented it. I was over at my friend's house, and we put it in, and it starts, and then it says, a film by Stanley Kubrick, and I'm like, oh man, it's the guy that did 2001. Oh man. And we were bored to tears. I don't even remember if we watched all of it, which would have been a shame because it's the end that gets really creepy.
Yeah.
And then years later, I started to watch other Kubrick films. I saw Doctor Strangelove and A Clockwork Orange, and then I'm like, maybe I need to rewatch some of these ones I didn't like. And I fell hook, line, and sinker for 2001, and I got the box sets, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch The Shining again. And I still didn't like it. I've seen this movie 15 times, and only within the last 10 years did I really start to appreciate it and like it. It's like when Spielberg said that when he was talking to Kubrick, when he first met him, because Kubrick was using the Elstree Studios to shoot The Shining, and Spielberg was coming in after him to shoot Raiders. And they met and they became friends, and Kubrick asked him if there was anything that he didn't like, and he said, yeah, The Shining. And he said, I've seen it many times since then, and now it's one of my favorite movies, but at the time I couldn't stand it. I'm kind of like that.
You're not too far from the critics, because when the critics saw this movie, they were mixed.
Yeah.
And they were very, the problem with Kubrick is you need time and you need repeat viewing to really appreciate it.
The problem with Kubrick is that he's Kubrick.
The problem with Kubrick is that he's Kubrick. And it's a slow burn horror film.
Very much so.
Which turns off a lot of fans, horror fans, who come to this movie cold.
Right.
And the Shining, let me tell you, this is a horror movie for people that don't like horror movies.
That's why I think I love it so much now.
It's a movie that people go that I know more people who hate horror movies who have seen this movie. My mother has seen this movie, and I can count on half a hand the number of horror movies that my mother's ever seen. And so this movie came to me when I was probably about 9 years old,
Oh.
about the time that it hit HBO for the first time. My dad loved this movie, and I remember in our household we had a thing whenever a movie would come on HBO. This was before VHS. Whenever a movie would come on HBO, and it was anything above a G rating,
Hmm.
Mom and Dad would watch it first, and then they would decide if my brother and I could watch the movie. And either we couldn't watch it or we had to watch it with them.
Hmm.
And my dad just fell in love with this movie, and I think the reason I loved it so much is because he took it as a comedy, kind of took it as picked it apart for the Jack Nicholson crazy man stuff.
I could see
You
that.
know, all of the funnier parts of it, and so I've always seen it like that. And I've
Okay.
always, of course, later on I went back and I looked at it and picked it apart as a horror film, but that was my initial reaction to it.
Hmm.
I love it, although I have issues. I'm just like everybody else. I have issues with it, but it's not. It's a strange film because
It
it's Kubrick.
is. Yeah.
There's no other filmmaker like Kubrick. I can think of people that approach Kubrick like the director who made It Follows,
Mm.
the film that we talked about a few weeks ago, was it last week,
Last
2 weeks
week.
ago, and Under the Skin, Jonathan
Hmm.
Glazer.
Hmm. Hmm.
I can see those kinds of dark,
They were
angular tones.
definitely, yeah, they were definitely influenced by The Shining, and I think directors on the whole, uh, only Wes Anderson has the attention to detail and the pickiness, but he can still get a movie done faster than Kubrick ever did.
Right.
Um, post
Hello, Shelley Duvall. Shelley Duvall. I was asked what it was like working with Kubrick. She said, "You ever seen Groundhog Day?" Because he was known for 163 takes.
Yeah,
He,
yeah.
he
I
was
mean
known for
that shot of Wendy running out, pushing open the door and running out. I think it's when she was running to the snow cat and found the distributor cap was ripped off. He had her take that something like 86 times,
oh,
just pushing the door open and running. She couldn't hear the cues because they weren't using walkies. She couldn't hear the cue to bust through the door because they were on the outside of the door and she was on the inside, and she couldn't hear them. So she kept
yeah,
missing the cue, and he kept railing into her. And
yeah. That's on film.
yeah, it is. It's on
Yeah,
Vivian Kubrick's really, really good video documentary, Making the Shining.
and also in a really good documentary, the Stanley Kubrick, The Life in Pictures,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
which is
That
really
is
good.
really
It's
good.
2.5 hours of Stanley Kubrick.
It
I mean,
is.
how much Kubrick can you take? But this
Um,
movie,
to be
I'm
honest, a
sorry.
lot.
Yeah, yeah. Trust me, I sat down and I watched every one of his films in chronological order.
Hmm.
That's a brain scrambler.
It is.
You know?
It is. I've done that too. I've actually started with his short documentaries. Um,
Yeah,
Day of the Fight, Flying Padre, and the Seafarers, and then I did the Fear and Desire, and Killer's Kiss. Those two, I'll tell you what, I've seen Killer's Kiss maybe
uh-huh.
15 times, and it's only an hour and 3 minutes, and about the half-hour mark, I check out every time.
It is
Every
the
time.
only Kubrick film I've never seen.
You're not missing a thing.
I'm told.
It's, it's so bad. But if you want to see it, it is actually a special feature on the Criterion Killing disc.
Okay.
They put out the Killing on Criterion Collection, and they put Killer's Kiss on as a special feature. So
Well, here's the thing, um, and I always say this. Now, this movie was released this movie was made because Kubrick wanted a commercial success.
Right. Yes,
He wanted to
exactly.
make a commercial film because Barry Lyndon had done so bad and done so badly at the box office.
Yes, it did.
So he wanted to essentially put together something that would have more of an audience appeal. So he goes through, and the story is he's sitting in his office, and his assistant is in the next room, and she can hear all these bumps on the wall as he's taking these novels and he's reading a couple of pages and then throwing them against the wall in this giant pile. She said she didn't hear a bump after a while, and it's like that was when he had picked up The Shining. And if you've ever read the book and you know the controversy, well, I don't call it controversy, but the disagreement that King had
The
with,
hardcore disagreement.
yeah, King really wrote a personal story about a man with alcohol, with a man he was an alcoholic and was having family issues, and he wrote this story. So he was working through a lot of stuff through this novel. And if you've ever read a King novel, this Stephen King is the king of details, character development. Whole chapters are given to one character, backgrounds, all of that. There's a whole chapter about Jack. There's a whole chapter about Wendy, about Danny, about Halloran.
He
And
kind of writes like Grady Tripp's second book, with the
right,
genealogy of the horses and everything from Wonder Boys. So,
yeah,
like,
yeah. It's like his second novel stretches on into what 1,100 pages,
is it maybe
and
no, it was over 1,500 or 1,300 pages. It
1,500
was
pages. Good lord.
huge.
And I admire his passion that he doesn't that when he does that he doesn't feel like he's just throwing something together.
Right.
And that's what artists do. They work through a lot of stuff, and that's what King did. The movie has none of that
No.
because the book has a lot. I won't say affection, but gets you to understand the plight that Jack is going through. The movie does not.
No.
The movie is very bare bones,
Yeah. And
and
and doesn't I haven't read the book, but the book centers more on the hotel
it
and
does.
the
There's a
ghosts in
lot
the
to the book.
hotel.
Oh, that could be a whole series of shows. It centers on the history of the hotel, why it's doing all of this. There's some things that you wish had been left in. There's some things you're glad it's left out, especially if you've seen the miniseries. That
With
six
Steven
hour
Weber.
miniseries.
Oh god.
Ew. Oh God, it's exhausting
Especially
because
I mean Steven Weber, who is best known for his role on television's Wings, is no Jack Nicholson.
well, he's not trying to be.
I mean, well, yeah, I mean, he's not even in the caliber, not that he's trying to replicate the performance, but he's not in the caliber that of actor that needed to be in that role.
Well, the original was Stanley Kubrick's The
Oh,
Shining.
oh yes, it was
This
not
was
Stephen
Stephen
King's.
King's.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Stephen King's The Shining. And the word loosely based is, yeah.
Very, very, yes.
Um, but let's get right into it because a couple of weeks ago we talked about Poltergeist.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how the opening of that film goes into their neighborhood. It's life affirming. It's full of life. It's full of greenery and just all kinds of things going on. And you're invited into this home.
Mm-hmm.
You're invited into their home and their lives. The opening of this movie is the polar opposite
It's so desolate.
because you are looking at the landscape of Colorado. And this weird shot, this wonderful but weird shot where the camera flies over St. Mary Lake,
Mm-hmm.
right past Wild Goose Island. And you're following this little car on the road as it's heading out of, I guess, civilization, you might say. This beautiful landscape. up into the mountains, into the snow, into this hotel. And as it's doing that, the music is telling you, don't go here. The music is telling you, stay away from here. This place is dangerous. And it's almost this sort of Berlioz type of booming orchestral score. And underneath it is this ghostly wailing.
Mm-hmm. That is the gloriously creepy work of Gregory Ligeti,
Mhm.
uh, who also Kubrick used some of his music as the theme for the monolith in
Mhm.
2001: A Space Odyssey, and the creepy orgy music or the creepy ceremony music in Eyes Wide Shut was also Ligeti. Um, he uses him as a common thread throughout his movies to imply weird or ominous stuff about to happen.
What's interesting is the editing also, um, because as you see the car driving, there don't appear to be any stops
Right? Yeah. No.
along the way. Now, of course, you know that there are turnoffs and there are gas stations and things like that. You don't see any of that, so it looks like one long
Single
continuous
solitary row.
right into this hotel, and you're following it like a ghost because there's
Mm-hmm.
one point where you're right behind the car and the camera goes off the road and you're just kind of flying in midair.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this bizarre again, the contrast to Poltergeist is that it's stay away from here.
Yeah.
And when he gets there, it's like this. It doesn't look that bad. Obviously, the hotel is very inviting. It's a beautiful old place. By the way, filmed on Elstree Studios,
Yeah.
and
All of
at
the
Elstree,
interiors were built on a soundstage to
yeah, the
scale.
soundstage where the Death Star was,
Yes, to scale. I mean,
to scale. Yeah,
it's just that had to be at Elstree. I mean, Kubrick stopped flying. He settled in England to make was it Lolita.
mhm,
He just decided he bought a house. He wasn't gonna fly anymore. He had a pilot's license. He wasn't afraid to fly. He just didn't want to go far away from home to work.
yeah,
So he just made everything in England after that. And it would have had to have been shot here anyway because the only other studio in the world that maybe could have accommodated these sets was the I can't remember the name of it, but it's like this huge soundstage outside of Rome. Uh,
yeah.
that,
At the Cheetah.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's the only other place in the world this could have been shot. These sets
Yeah,
could have been built without having to do some major construction.
yeah, yeah. And when you look at it, and it's like Kubrick's sets are always very sterile,
Yeah.
very angular. It's like a hospital room, and they're very clean and very spare. When we talked about Poltergeist, we talked about the house looking, you could see all of these things in the corners, plants, the kitchen and
Mm-hmm.
dishes and towels and all of these things, and lived in, little things, housekeeping details.
Right, right, right.
Kubrick's films don't have that.
No.
And his angles and his shots are always, he loves that shot down a long, infinite hallway.
Yeah.
He loves that shot, that 4 point shot. Um, it's strange, and it's all through this film,
Oh,
all
yeah.
through this film.
All the way through. The other one, I always loved his tracking shot when you're tracking a character, but then there's obstacles in the way that get in front of the camera, like an aisle or a column or something, but you're still tracking with the character, so that thing gets in the way of the camera.
Right.
Very naturalistic eyesight, kind of a
Oh, they do that. They do that in the opening when
yeah.
he's going across St. Mary Lake, and you're approaching Wild Goose Island, and the helicopter, of course, it's a helicopter shot. You almost feel like you're going to run into the trees, and then he just skews just to the side of it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it goes right past it, so you feel like it's right next to your head almost.
Mm-hmm.
That scene, and he plays with your perceptions like that. The scene where Danny is riding his big wheel through
Oh,
the hallways of this thing. Somehow I know exactly where he's going to run into those girls,
yeah.
but every time I see the movie,
It's like ah.
I keep expecting them to be around every corner. Honestly, I'm waiting for them to be around every corner, even though I know where that shot is. So he plays with your head a little bit.
He really does. And the glorious thing is that he keeps the topography intentionally vague. So when you
Yeah,
see any of the characters in any part of the hotel, you don't know where they are.
right. Because you're not sure where their quarters are in conjunction with the kitchen, the front room, the boiler room. None of it. You
Right.
don't. They're there, but you're not sure exactly where they are.
Right, because you're not taken on a Steadicam trip through the hotel. You're taken on a cut up Steadicam trip through the hotel. Just here's this place, cut. Here's this place, cut. Here's this place. It's like we're
Yeah,
gonna
I have.
show you all the places that you're gonna be, but you're not gonna know where they are in relation to anything
When he's
else.
sitting in that front room and he's working on his and he's typing, I couldn't tell you where the gold room is.
No, absolutely
I
not.
couldn't tell you where room 237 is.
Except
I
you know
couldn't
that it's
tell
on
you.
the second floor, but you don't know quite where the lobby is. The lobby's obviously on
Right.
the first floor or the ground floor, but like it would be up that staircase, but where?
Mm-hmm.
And where are their quarters? Are their quarters a big apartment off the back, like a servant's quarters kind of a thing? Like what? There's no how far away from it is the kitchen because she needs that trolley to get from the kitchen to the room. But how far is it?
He he
Like,
goes to he goes to the front desk at the opening of the film before the interview,
mhm.
but you have no idea where that front desk is
No, you never
for the
see it
rest of the
again.
movie. You never see it again. You don't know where his well. You don't know where Ullman's office is either
Right. And that's
because
just down the hall and to the right, to the left.
right,
You just
right.
walk down, you follow Jack, and
You know again. Yeah, I'm sorry.
no, it's just by keeping
Well,
everything close at hand, he obfuscates everything.
right.
It's like watching a magician. The closer you watch, the more you're gonna miss.
Well, and also every time you see the movie, you're going to see something different. Well,
Mm-hmm.
what I noticed this time, and I've seen the movie probably 15 times in my life. What I noticed this time was the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
The dialogue in this movie seems to be very, very, very carefully chosen. Um, I was particularly interested in the interview
Mm-hmm.
because when he comes in to talk to Mr. Allman, you notice that Jack's interview style is pretty much what we all do at an interview. You'll tell the interviewer everything as long as it's positive.
Right.
He agrees with everything.
Yeah.
Give me the job. I don't care.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
Well, he tells him, you know, here's what the hotel. You notice as Allman's talking, his dialogue gets darker and darker and darker.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about what the hotel is. Um, he talks about why it was chosen for its space, why it's not open for the skiing season. And then he starts talking about the duties.
Mm-hmm.
Then he starts talking about the cabin fever.
Yeah.
Then he gets into Charles Grady.
Mm-hmm.
You notice as he's talking, it's like you start with a sales pitch. It's like you get darker and darker and darker. And Jack is sitting there with this fake, banal smile on his face. And every answer is positive. You see,
Right. And then he's like, "Well, we you can understand why we didn't want to just tell you that." And he goes, "No, that's certainly something." And I get why your colleagues in Denver didn't left it for you to tell. And my wife is a
As for my
confirmed
wife, you don't have to worry about it. She's a confirmed ghost story and horror movie addict. She'll be fascinated. Tell him anything to get the
anything,
frickin' job.
anything.
We can all relate.
Yes,
Okay?
he's so professional. He's like the best version of himself in that interview.
Yeah.
He's
It's just
never
like
like that again.
it's like well, you'll have to you'll have to bleed the boiler. You'll have to make some repairs. And by the way, you might get a little cabin fever. And by the way, somebody killed his family with an axe 10 years ago.
Yeah,
Does that bother you?
because
No, no, you know.
when you really start to break this down, like one of the main criticisms was that he went crazy too quick
Yeah, I was
because
gonna bring that up.
like they come in on October 30th, which if you're listening on the day we post this is the day we're posting this.
Right.
So,
Not by design.
no, no, but really kind of clever and cool anyway. Um, he's supposed to be there from basically October 31st would be his first day by himself or with the family there until the beginning of May.
Uh-huh.
That is a long time.
But it's also, and I was gonna bring that point up. It's also this: if you follow the cards, if you follow the interstitial cards, when it says
Hmm.
Monday or
Hmm.
Tuesday,
Hmm.
it's about a month and I think about 2 weeks.
Yeah,
About a month and a
because
half.
it does say
Or
1 month later, and then it goes through another week
right,
after that first week,
it's about a month and maybe 2 weeks
month and a
before he
half. Yeah,
starts losing his marbles.
right.
And it is also um, it's two things. One, it's the hotel screwing with his brain,
Hmm.
and the other, which is an issue we got to talk about, which is his drinking.
Yes.
Jack and I think the movie kind of bypasses this, but it doesn't really go into it. Jack was a school teacher.
Yeah, they do
Now,
mention that.
in the book, he had an incident where he got fired from being a school teacher because he caught one of his students trying to cut his tires on his car,
Hmm.
and he beat the kid up. That's why he lost his job.
Ah.
I think that's why he needs this job. And he struggles with it,
Hmm.
and he struggles with it in this movie too. But he had this incident that Wendy talks about in her performance. We're going to talk a lot about her performance
Oh.
too. When he dislocated Danny's shoulder, and he promised her that he would never drink again. He's not a recovering alcoholic. He's a dry drunk.
Yeah. Here's my question. Now, you said that the dialogue was all very specifically chosen,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
So when Wendy is telling the doctor about the incident of Danny's shoulder, she says that he had had too much to drink and school papers were scattered around and he pulled them and he used a little bit too much strength and dislocated his shoulder. And he said, Wendy, I'm never going to have another drink again. And that was 5 months ago.
Right.
If you cut then to when he's talking to Lloyd, the ghost bartender,
Hmm.
he
He still
tells the
says 5
story
months.
again. He says, I pulled him and it was just a little bit more pressure per second. And that was 3 fucking years ago.
Hmm.
And I haven't had a drink in 5 months. It's like, wait, if you did it 3 years ago and said you were never going to drink again, how has it only been 5 months that you've been sober? And if it was 3 years ago, he wouldn't have been in nursery school, which is what Wendy said, that he was in nursery school, and then they just kept him out after his injury, and they moved from Connecticut to Denver.
Here's what we tend to do. Here it is. Here it is. We have a tendency to love and revere Stanley Kubrick so much that we will forgive him continuity errors as an artistic statement.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's why so many people are willing to forgive the continuity errors in this movie, and there are plenty,
There are.
because it's Stanley Kubrick. If it were anybody else, if this were Ivan Reitman, if
Right.
this were anybody else, if this were,
Steven
uh,
Spielberg or
Steven Spielberg, we wouldn't be so forgiving. There'd be books written about the continuity errors.
yeah, yeah,
But because
yeah.
it's Stanley Kubrick, it's seen as, well, he's really trying to make a statement here.
Right. He's
You know?
doing this on purpose
Right.
because the man took so long to put together a movie after a while that this is his third to last film,
Yeah.
but his last film was released in 1999 posthumously. The only other movie in between was in 1987, Full Metal Jacket. He did
Right.
this at 80, Full Metal Jacket at 87, Eyes Wide Shut in 99. Those were his last three films over the course of 19 years.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not like he wasn't working on other stuff. He was trying to get stuff together and things would fall through or he would move on because like he was trying to do something called the Aryan Papers in the early 90s that he abandoned. It was a Holocaust movie, and he abandoned it because first he said, "I'm a Jew. How can I do this?" And second, he realized that it wasn't going to get done before Schindler's List, so he
Yeah.
abandoned it. He would have
And then
abandoned Full
Napoleon.
Metal Jacket, but it was too far. It was too close to being done before Oliver Stone's Platoon came out. So he's like, "Oh, I can't abandon it." So they just delayed the release.
Yeah. And also Napoleon, which the studio
Oh,
pulled because of a movie called Waterloo had failed. Um,
I've read the screenplay for Napoleon.
mhm.
Oh, that would have been an
Yeah.
amazing movie.
Yeah.
I heard Steven Spielberg got the rights to it and he's going to turn it into like an HBO miniseries or something now.
Oh, Stephen, please don't. Please get away from Stanley Kubrick. Because Stephen is not Stanley, and Stanley is not Stephen.
No, and
There are
AI
two polar
proved that.
opposites. AI proved that. You can't mix the two. It doesn't work.
They are very, very clashing sensibilities.
Well, and also, and yeah, the AI I think is one of the most debated and discussed films probably of the millennium, in which it's just, some people hail it a masterpiece and some people hail it as just a failed experiment.
I like it more
I'm in
every
the latter.
time I see it, but I'm still I had a friend in film school that wrote a big defense of it, and I have his paper. Uh, he makes a lot of excellent points, and he's not
Yeah.
wrong. It's just
Mm.
there's also a lot of stuff that he doesn't mention that kind of takes away from a lot of that. So
Right.
it's
Well, coming
hard.
back to this, well, coming back to
Yes.
The Shining, I really, I'm interested in the family dynamic,
Hmm.
and again, going back to Poltergeist, that family was so together, and we got to know them, we got to like them, and we got to see how they were connected together. This family, my
It's
God,
not together at
the
all.
first time you see them together is in this tiny little Volkswagen. The look on Nicholson's face, I want to kill these people.
Right.
He's got this,
Talking about the Donner Party.
yeah, he's got this irritated look on his face. Like, I just want to get there and just space away. And the way that they approach their son is interesting, because the first thing the kid says is, "I'm hungry," and Jack says, "Well, you shouldn't have eaten your breakfast." And the mother's like, "Well, you can eat something when you get to the hotel." And it's that kind of thing.
Uh-huh. But
It's like he
also
shuts it down, and she kind of leaves it open a little bit.
and there's a commentary we talked about in Poltergeist how there's a contempt for the television.
Uh-huh.
There is an equal contempt for the television here, which is weird because Stanley Kubrick loved TV.
Yeah.
But when they talk about the Donner Party and uh, Danny goes, no, it's okay, Mom. I know all about cannibalism. I saw it on TV. And he's like, see, Wendy? He saw it on the TV. It's
Saw it on the
okay.
television.
And then when he snaps, he starts quoting television.
Yeah.
Like the Here's Johnny, which apparently, this might be apocryphal, but Jack Nicholson did not ever watch television, apparently.
Mhm.
And Kubrick had to explain the Here's Johnny to him.
Somebody's going to have to explain the context of this movie because while it's a great moment and it's the most iconic moment in the entire movie, what in the world does it have to do with this movie? He chops the door up, he sticks his head, and he says, "Here's Johnny." What does that have to? Why does he say that?
Well, it's the introduction. He's pushing his way in, just like the introduction of Johnny Carson did. He brought him into your house,
Mm.
and the invasive ability of television to be omnipresent, and like that's I think that's what it was. We're gonna
Yeah, and
I want to talk about when we get to that part, the amazing camera work with the axe swings.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
But when we talk about um, for Jack's drinking, is that he is so from the moment we see him when there's that tension when they're sitting in that car and they're
mhm.
driving to the Overlook and they're just um, they have really it's not really a discussion. You know, they're
No,
talking about the Donner Party, but it's not really a discussion. It's just trying to break the tension because that's why she
hmm,
brings it up,
right.
and she's trying to just kind of you know break the silence because when you're sitting in an uncomfortable silence, particularly in a car,
For
it
three and a
can
half
be
hours, which is how
for
long
three and
he
a
said
half
it
hours.
took him to get there for the interview.
Right, 3.5 hours, and they get there.
They don't even have the radio on.
They don't have the radio on. They may not even have a radio,
Right.
or it may not work. But you can see, and what's interesting is that their relationship is cemented right there at the beginning
Hmm.
because um, he's a struggling drunk.
Yeah.
She's a pathological doormat,
Yeah.
and is one of these women that I think has this idea that, well, I'll fix him. You know,
Right, 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 right. Because when she's talking to the doctor, when she's explaining the shoulder incident, she's making a ton of excuses.
right,
Like
while nervously
any
smoking a cigarette.
right, well any what any battered woman who refuses to accept the fact that she's in an abusive relationship would do. They cover up for them, they explain it away, and it's like, okay, we see where she is. All right, that makes her transformation all the more triumphant.
And she's constantly, constantly smoking
Oh yeah.
all through the movie. I don't know if she's chain smoking, but she every time you see her, she's smoking a cigarette, and it's um, that nervous habit, almost like biting your nails or something.
Mhm. Mhm.
You're in the presence of someone who can snap, who can knock you down at any moment,
Right.
and it's always that feeling.
Mhm.
You're waiting for it to snap. So here's the thing: this movie probably didn't need ghosts
No,
to be
it
scary.
it didn't.
You know,
It really
if you
didn't.
took the haunting out of this movie, this family would be scary anyway. Like I said, he's a violent drunk. She's a pathological doormat, and the kid is psychic.
Yeah.
You didn't need ghosts for this.
No,
It's just
you really didn't. That's the ghosts. The ghosts are just kind of there. Like the only real purpose that they serve is Grady lets Jack out of the dry goods.
well, we can talk about that because what happens, I think, is that this hotel, I mean, probably more haunted than any place in any movie I've ever seen. What
Well, it
it's
was
doing,
built
I think,
on top of a Native American burial ground, of course.
right? So what happens is, as people die in this hotel, it absorbs their soul
Mm-hmm.
into the history of this hotel. And in the book, I so wish that there had been an allusion to this in the movie. In the book, it is revealed that basically the hotel wants to kill Danny so that it can have his psychic power. And
Ah,
and so yeah, so that's why it
okay.
employs Jack to kill him, and it goes after the weakest member of the family
Mm-hmm.
mentally.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it starts playing on his need for alcohol. It starts playing on that weakness and starts giving him what he wants, so that he starts uh, doing what they say,
So that he can
and
be
it really starts twisting his
manipulated.
brain.
Yeah.
So he can be manipulated because he can't do that to her. Certainly
No.
can't do that to him.
Mm-mm.
But that's. I wish that the movie had just a little bit of that. But that's why it wants it. Of course, it eventually gets Jack, and you
Yeah.
see that at the picture at the very end. But what's interesting is the saving grace of this whole thing is not really a saving grace because we think that Mr. Halloran is going to be the one to save them. But Kubrick has a trick up his sleeve in that Halloran goes to all this trouble. So the whole movie goes to all this trouble to get up there, to get from Miami to Colorado, and then take the snowcat all the way up to the hotel. And he has this, and he gets there, and we think he's going to be the one to grab Wendy and Danny and take them out
He gets
and
down
drive
the
them away,
hallway and gets axed in the chest.
and gets axed in the chest.
He's the only person that actually gets murdered on screen.
Right, right.
Which,
And here's the thing, and I guess, and I'm guessing that he's probably he is psychic, but he's a little less psychic than Danny. That conversation, by the way, again, like just like the interview, that conversation that he has with the kid is so revealing.
mm-hmm,
If you listen very carefully, because the kid, as they're talking, outmaneuvers him.
mm-hmm.
He's talking to him, and he sort of Halloran sort of looks inward, and he's trying to draw out what Danny knows.
Mm-hmm.
Again, carefully chosen dialogue.
But then Danny
And he
turns it and
talks
says,
about
"What's in room 237?
right,
You're afraid of
right,
room 237."
right, and he says, they're talking about the imaginary friend,
Mm-hmm.
and he
Tony.
says, did Tony ever tell you about this place, the Overlook Hotel? And you see this look on his face, and the kid almost looks like he already knows what he's going to be asked.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating. If you just listen very carefully to what's being said, it's amazing. Because he says, is there something bad here? Because he can sense it, but he can't see it.
Right.
Like it's a feeling he gets, like the Force. He gets a feeling in it. But it's so brilliant because you're set up. Kubrick is setting you up to believe that this man will be the one to save them, and he doesn't.
Right. Well, yeah, he does. Not
Well, I mean,
directly, but his having the snowcat up there provides them with the means of escape.
but you're thinking that
That
he's
was
going to
not
be
to
the
save
one
them.
to drive them away.
Right, 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 right. No.
Especially if you've read the book, because in the book he lives. And it's an amazing conjuring act. He's a magician. He's playing a trick on you.
Mm-hmm.
Kubrick is. He's playing a trick on you. And when he finally reveals his hand, it's not what you expect.
Right.
And even at the end, when he finally lays that trick on you with the picture at the end of the hallway, you're still not sure. You
No.
have to think back in your mind to put it together. Because the great thing about Kubrick, one of the greatest tricks Kubrick ever played is in that it's not what he says in his films, it's what he doesn't say.
Right.
That's a through line all through his films.
Mm-hmm.
It's what he's not saying. It's what you have to bring to it. And his films are challenging, even a film as simple as this.
See, and there's a whole lot of interpretations, which the that documentary Room 237 um, painfully details. You like it a lot more than I do. Um, but when you really think about it, the one theory that I had um, that would correlate with it is that the Overlook Hotel and Jack aren't real. Jack's dead, and this is his hell, and he has to be the caretaker throughout all of the history of this. And every time something happens, he dies, and then he comes back and he's getting this job. He has a history, and then this is his hell. He has to live through this so that when he dies at the end, he's just going to
Yeah.
come back the next winter with a different family, with a different backstory, like he's never been there, and then he's going to have to replay this whole thing again. And it's either because he would have been alive when Grady did that to his family. But then Grady the ghost says, "You've always been the caretaker." And you see that
Mm-hmm.
picture from was about
1921.
8 years after the hotel got finished.
Mm-hmm.
Because they said it broke ground in 1907 and was finished in 1913.
1909.
1909.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've got this picture there. You get the sense that either that's the ghosts that absorbed him. If you read the book, you would think that the ghosts absorbed him and just put him in there.
Yeah.
But I interpret, because I have not read the book. I've never read a Stephen King book. I will say that. Um, I've tried to read The Stand, but I think I got like 10
Oh,
pages. I think I got like 10 pages in. Um, it could be like a hell for him, forced to repeat this over and over every year, and depending on who his family is that he's paired with, that he goes sooner or later, or because I thought it was very interesting that it was really like a month and a half. This is like mid December that this is
of,
going on.
of course, we're not 100% sure. I tried to find this online last night, how long it usually takes cabin fever to set in, and I couldn't find anything.
It depends
Um,
on the person.
it depends on the person. It
It could be
depends
a
on
couple of
where.
days, it could be months, it could be years.
Well, in his case, given the haunting and the drinking, I would think, the haunting and the drinking, you would think that when you get down, that for him it wouldn't be very long.
No, because
And
he has the shining too. He just doesn't know. He's one of the ones that Halloran talks about that doesn't know it.
I'm never sure about that. I've heard that theory before, but I'm never sure if he was actually psychic. I'm interested in this one shot again, the magician's trick, where Jack is looking at the maze, the hedge maze, the model,
That
and
was gorgeous.
when you see he's looking at the model in the front lobby, the front room of the hedge maze, and he's looking down, and you see straight down into it. And as it gets closer and closer and closer, you can see Wendy and Danny running around in it.
Do you know how they did that?
I don't.
It's the only special effect in the movie. They shot the hedge maze. They had like a replica of the hedge maze from a really high up apartment building, and they shot down so that they could see that. And then they took that and used composite photography to put it into the hedge maze in the replica in the on the inside. So they shrunk it down and composited it in, and it's apparently, according to the Steadicam operator, the only real special effect in the whole movie. Everything else they did was there and practical in-camera stuff.
Hmm. Okay.
It's the only composition shot that they did, which is funny when you think about it because a lot of that stuff could have been composite shots,
Yeah.
but Kubrick did not do it that way.
It's all practical.
Yeah,
There is a special effect that he plays um, so much so well that you don't even know that it's a special effect. It's when Danny comes out of the room 237 and he has a bruise on his neck,
hmm
and he goes down to the front room and she starts yelling at Jack because she thinks he's injured Danny
again.
again. She picks up Danny and she walks backwards with him out of the room. You're so focused on Wendy's reaction and also that stupid look on Jack Nicholson's face, like what? When he's sitting there at the chair and he's got his hand up, like what? And
Yeah,
as she's walking backwards out of the room, you don't notice that Danny is actually a mannequin because you're not looking there.
right.
If you've ever picked up a child, you will note that a child will usually put their arms around you
hmm
and sometimes their feet. He doesn't do that. He's very stiff. And I think part of the reason was because I think part of the reason was because the actor who played Danny was 8, 9 years old,
I thought
and
he was about 6.
She had to swear in that scene.
Yeah.
I think that's why he's not in it. But if you watch that scene, it's a mannequin because he's got his hands behind his back when she's carrying him
Well, I think it
out.
also plays in with the state of mind that Danny would have been in,
His state of mind because he
because
comes in and he's
he
catatonic.
was very much catatonic. He was in shock. He was scared. So if you if you pick up a child and they're asleep, they'll just kind of hang
Yeah,
limp, and especially if they're older, like 6, like Danny is, they'll just be like ragdolly. They won't still
right.
be as stiff as that, but they won't move to put, you know. But it's that is really, you told me about that, and I was watching the commentary last night, but I fell asleep before that scene. So
But it's interesting that you're not even looking at that. You don't
no,
notice it either.
no.
You're focused on her, and you're focused on their reactions to what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one thing I wanted to bring up also, it's probably the most famous scene in the movie, is when the alcohol starts to come back because he's been off the wagon. He promised Wendy he would quit, and he quit
Right.
cold turkey.
He'd been on the wagon for 5 months.
Yeah, he stopped drinking and he became a dry drunk. Which the difference between a dry drunk and recovering alcoholic is that a dry drunk still has the dysfunctional behaviors. Recovering alcoholic does not. And
And
so
a
he's
dry drunk thinks that they can do it on their own. Recovering
right,
alcoholic realizes that help is needed.
right. But he finds the bar. The change in Jack happens at that moment
Yeah,
because he's
when he
sitting at the bar with his hands on his face and he says, I'd sell my soul for a glass of beer.
hmm
And it's at that moment when he moves his hands down that he sees Lloyd the bartender.
and he knows who he is immediately.
Right. And the guy looks like the devil. He has on this red jacket. He's got this black silk slick back hair and this sardonic smile on his face.
And that actor has was in practically every Kubrick movie from The Killing up until this movie. I don't think he was in the
Yeah.
last two, but he was in almost all of them from The Killing up to this.
Yeah, he also you might some people might recognize him. He was Tyrell in Blade Runner.
Yes, he
His
was.
name is Joe Turtle.
Just 2 years
And
later.
2 years later. But it's interesting. He never takes his eyes off of him. He's looking at him. That famous Kubrick gaze where he's looking under the brows,
Yeah.
and he's looking at him, and he never blinks, and he never looks away. And that banal delivery. telling him what he wants to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Women can't live with him, can't live without him. And Jack is just giving in these little, you know, he's trying to be funny, and like, words of wisdom, Lloyd, words of wisdom. And he gives him a bourbon, and he's drinking it. And here's the thing: the hotel, as time goes on, as time goes on, the hotel is getting stronger and stronger and stronger through
Mm-hmm.
Jack until it is able to manipulate, until it is able to manifest certain things. So I think
Mm-hmm.
alcohol actually was there.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I mean, if they because they were able to see these spirits, and especially Jack, but Danny could see these manifestations, and it actually bruised Danny's neck. That woman. There's no reason to believe that the booze wasn't there.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and that's what began. That's what accelerated his slippery slope into just insanity.
And the ghosts are testing him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can get friendly with him. We can cozy up to him. We can give him booze. And then he goes back to the second visit. And the second
Mm-hmm.
visit is where he sees the party. And he sees all these people around and everything. And he goes up and he gets a drink, and he walks up, and the waiter bumps into him.
Grady, played by Philip Stone, who also played the father in A Clockwork Orange,
He was also
and
Colonel
another part
Blumber
in yeah.
in Temple of Doom.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He was also in
And
Barry Lyndon. He was a
yes,
regular for Kubrick,
Kubrick worked with the same actors quite a bit.
but only the
But
side actors. The only.
and by the way, when he bumps into him and he spills that drink on him,
Mm-hmm.
that's Advocat. If you know what Advocat smells like,
I
that
don't.
jacket is done with. That jacket is finished. Just light it on a bonfire because it's finished. You are never getting that smell out. Mixed with bourbon. I mean, just and he takes him in the bathroom. By the way, the use of colors in this movie,
Oh,
unbelievable. That red and white bathroom,
oh my God, yeah.
and you're just standing there, and it's like this again sterile
Mm-hmm.
environment. And he's cleaning the jacket, and he says, and he starts getting nervous because he starts looking at him because I
Right.
think he's probably seen his picture on a maybe on
Well,
a.
he's. Do I know you, Grady? Right? Didn't you murder your
That's a
family?
very blunt question.
You were the caretaker here. Is like, no, sir. You've always been the caretaker. Hmm.
And then Grady twists on it because you don't see his face
Mm-mm.
until they do this close up. You have always been the caretaker here. And there's this Kubrick thing. There are spaces between the words.
Ugh.
There's these eerie spaces between the words. When he talks about his wife, I corrected her,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
And
all of a sudden the what?
the way that the way that Kubrick filmed, like we were saying, he's 100 takes, 80 takes, whatever. He would push this until he got whatever he wanted. He didn't know what he wanted, but he knew it when he found it.
Yeah,
And so he would just retake and retake and retake and retake and retake and retake and retake. Sometimes because he didn't want the prepared, um, the actor's prepared version of whatever it was. So he would push them to being too tired to do whatever they had rehearsed, and then he started to get more genuine emotion out of them, which is
why he tortured Shelley Duvall,
oh God.
most likely.
And she, I mean, at the time she was just desperately upset with him, but later on she said that it was one of the best experiences of her life because she understood later when she had time to think about it, she knew what he was doing.
Like, well, she said she would never go through it again,
Right.
but she appreciated the experience because of Stanley.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we could talk about her performance because the movie is all Jack. I mean, when people think of the crazy man Jack, I think this is where it comes from.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's,
This
it's
was
Easy Rider, it's Cuckoo's Nest, and then it's The Shining. But The Shining is really almost a parody of those other two.
right, and it's also the dress rehearsal for the Joker.
It's the dress rehearsal for the Joker, and uh, but she really, I think is underrated. Is really been underrated in this
You
film
know,
because
I think Shelley
she
Duvall
has
has
to
always
play.
been underrated.
She is, and I think it's because she's not classically beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Because she doesn't. I mean, she has an odd face,
Mm-hmm.
those big eyes and that wide
Mm-hmm.
mouth and big
Mm-hmm.
teeth. I don't think um, if it hadn't been for filmmakers like Woody Allen and Robert Altman, I don't think she would have gotten a chance.
No, she made her debut with Altman. I think Nashville.
Um, yeah, yeah, I think so. No,
And
she was in McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. That was her first. That was her first picture. And then he cast her. Altman cast her throughout the '70s. In Nashville, Three Women, which is brilliant.
It is
Popeye,
brilliant.
which isn't. Uh,
That's the first time I ever saw her was in Popeye.
was Popeye. She's the perfect olive oil.
The same year.
No one could have played that better, but yeah, she played opposite Jack Nicholson and Robin Williams in the same year.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's a resume. I worked with Stanley Kubrick. But the funny thing is, Well, the great thing is her performance in this movie. She is required to be hysterical for most of it.
Yeah, and she
She's required to be the positive, um, understanding wife to a violent alcoholic.
mhm. Mhm.
But then is required to spend the back half of the movie being hysterical, screaming, running, shaking, all of that stuff, and it's just it's a performance. It's a full-blooded physical performance.
Mhm.
Um,
She
one
gives
thing,
it
one great scene, one really great scene that if you watch the movie again, you really need to pay attention. Is the scene where she goes to the when she goes to Jack at the typewriter,
oh,
and he basically tears her apart.
if I'm typing,
Yeah,
if I'm not typing, whatever the fuck it is I'm doing in here, I'm working. Do you understand that?
and then it ends with this really horrible. He says, "Why don't you start by getting the fuck out of here?"
Yeah.
And you see the look on her face,
She's scared that he's going to hit her.
and her feelings are hurt.
Yeah. Like she's
Like
just trying to
after
be
all the support I've
nice.
given you, after all the support I've given you, after everything I've been for you, this is what I get
They moved
for
all
trying
the
to
way out
kill
to
me.
Colorado to escape your past as a teacher because there was an incident and that you know they're here doing this thing that she clearly would rather not be doing.
Right.
And she's ended up taking on most of his responsibilities
You
by
know
the
she does the work. You know she does the work. She does the cooking, and she bleeds the boiler.
uh-huh.
You notice that?
Yeah.
It's funny. I was going to mention that. It's like she's doing the job
She
for him,
is. She's doing the
so
job
he
while
can
he's
write.
all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Right. Right. And but that scene where she's just you see the look on her face, and she's just destroyed by it, and then
Yeah.
she just turns and leaves.
Mhm.
It's a great moment.
And she never goes
Great.
back into that room until after until the incident after room 237.
Now is that when he has the nightmare? When is
Uh,
it?
yes. Yes. He has the nightmare. She's screaming. He's screaming. She goes up cuz she was downstairs doing the boiler. and she goes up and she's comforting him, and then Danny walks in.
Right.
So that was the next time, and that was a good month later.
Yeah. Um, because I love the scene with the baseball bat.
Oh,
Which where she got the baseball bat, I'm not sure, but um,
they
she's
probably had
developed
it for Danny to play with or something.
something like that. But she's on the stairs and Jack is going crazy and she's swinging the bat. And Jack's doing all these crazy man things, Wendy, give me the bat. All of that stuff.
Give me the bat. I'm not
Stop
gonna
swinging the
hurt
bat.
you. Just get
Just
away
put it
from
back.
me.
You're great.
I told you I'm not gonna hurt you, but you didn't let me finish my sentence. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
What I love is when he gets finished doing all the being crazy, and he just gets irritated.
Yeah.
When he give me the bat. Stop swinging the bat.
It's like
It's like this turn from crazy to just annoyed.
like I was putting on a show for you, but now just give me the bat.
And she whacks him on the head. She gives him a good whack on the top of the head.
And then he falls backwards down the steps, and like he's got this huge mark. He's obviously got like about 4 concussions in one.
How did he wrench his ankle? When does he wrench his ankle?
I think when he falls down the steps.
Oh, that's okay. Because you notice he's hobbling at the end of the film.
See, you know why I thought he did that? I thought that was a stylistic choice between he and Kubrick to make him look more like Frankenstein's monster, which is what he
Yeah,
devolves
yeah.
into at the end, especially in the hedge maze when he's running after Danny. He starts off yelling, "Danny, Danny, where are you?" And it just ends up going, "Ah, ah,
Yeah, at
ah."
the end when he gets in that, at the end when Danny gets out, and Jack can't find his way out, he's just howling
Yeah,
like Frankenstein.
he's trying to talk, but he sounds like Frankenstein's monster. He's just like,
Right, right. And uh, of course, we got to talk about the end of this movie because there are there are three things going on. Halloran's trying to get there. Jack is chasing Danny around, and Wendy is running around the hotel. And the hotel's not trying to kill her. It's just screwing with her.
It's just messing
It's
with
like,
her. She's
it's just messing with her.
she is the ancillary part. They want Danny gone. They want Halloran gone. They're just tormenting her. I mean
Right.
the blowjob in the bear suit and the
Oh God, the blowjob in the bear suit. Let me tell you, that's I don't. I love what I love about that. It's about 2 seconds, but he looks up. And the guy in the tuxedo has a look on his face like, "Do you mind?"
yeah, yeah, like they just look at her like what?
And of course, you see this movie so many times, and you're like, okay, whoever's in the bear suit is filleting the guy in the tux. But did you notice the bear suit has the hindquarters cut out?
Yeah, I did. I saw that last night or yesterday afternoon when I was watching it. I was like, I never saw that before. This is like a furry cosplay kind of thing.
It's furries before furries. You
Yeah.
know,
I mean, because the rump is cut out, so obviously this was a precursor to much more activity,
yeah.
and they just turn and look, and the guy sits up and looks, is like, what? Why are you looking at us
Look,
like that?
do you mind?
And then she
It's
goes into
turns
the
around.
ballroom, and there's like all the skeletons and the cobwebs, like it hasn't been cleaned for 60 years.
There's a guy who's been cleaved in the head. Great pussy.
Yeah.
And there's the skeletons and all of this stuff. It's just
It's
like
like,
it almost seems like it's randomly chosen. It's like, okay, we'll throw this here.
yeah, yeah. It's like she's already freaking out. Let's give her something really to go nuts over.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing that gets me. The guy that's been cleaved in the head is supposed to scare her, right? The skeletons are supposed to scare her, right?
Yeah.
What is the guy in the bear suit supposed to do? Is that supposed to scare her?
I think it's supposed to just take her off balance, which it certainly does.
It's like, it's not, I mean, is this supposed to be scary? It's like you're just weirding her. Now you're just weirding her
I
out.
think it's just supposed to be this odd thing to get her off balance because those are the first ghosts she sees.
Right,
So
right.
it's like they're there, and then it's like, wait a minute, there's two guys here, and oh, look at what they're doing.
Yeah,
Wait a minute, we're alone here. Wait a minute, there's so many things to process in that just brief looking at them,
yeah,
and then she stumbles into the guy with the hatchet in his head and the skeletons. It's like she's taken off balance. Like, oh, there's ghosts here, and then there's this full on. Let's see if we can get her to kill herself instead of having Jack do
yeah. But she's running around with this knife in her hand, and there are scenes that, by the way, the lighting in this movie is unbelievable.
it. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, he was the king of
it's
lighting.
oh yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
they called Gordon Willis the Prince of Darkness. You know, his photograph, The Godfather,
Hmm.
called him the Prince of Darkness. Cooper was all about lighting,
Oh yeah. I
and
mean,
there was so much lighting on this set that I think they started a fire at one point.
yeah. When you look at it, when you look outside, because all of the interiors are on a soundstage, you think that there would be something out of the windows. There's not. There's like a million watts of light pouring in through. And that's actually the Steadicam operator that does the commentary, who invented the Steadicam,
Yeah.
uh, said there's a million watts of light. And he would say that he started off getting annoyed because Kubrick would be the director in the one director in 1,000 that would go, nope, grab the camera, say, no, do it like this. And he would get mad, and then they would see the dailies, and he would get even more mad because Kubrick was right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he started his career as a look photographer at 15 when when Truman died,
Mm-hmm.
um, or
No, when
FDR,
FDR
when FDR died in 43.
45.
Yeah, sorry. 45 after being
I
elected
just
to
watched
his
the
fourth
documentary. That's
term.
how I know it.
Yeah. uh, uh, Kubrick took the picture of the newsstand operator in Queens, and it got published in Look magazine, and it's this internationally famous photo even today. Um, and that's how he got his start. He started as a photographer for Look magazine, which was the premier pictorial magazine of the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And he got into filmmaking because he was watching movies. He's like, I could do that better. But again, if you watch his first two, that's a really bold statement and not really backed up. But later on,
They did. They didn't take him seriously. There was he was on the set of a film and he was working with the this I think this Oscar-winning cinematographer.
Lucien
And
Ballard,
the cinematographer, Lucien Ballard, yeah, had moved his
I think it was
camera.
I think it was Paths of Glory. I think it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
had moved his camera, and he said his daughter said the reason he got irritated with this guy is because not because he changed his shot, but because he thought that Stanley would think it mattered,
Right.
and he very quietly told him, "Get off my set.
Yeah.
You can't do what I tell you to do." And it's very revealing.
Mhm.
You know, it tells you something about him as a filmmaker
Yeah.
that
He was
everything had a purpose.
and everything was controlled to within an inch of its life.
You know something? I was thinking about this the other day. I've heard stories, and I've heard stories about the making of the film Heaven's Gate.
Okay.
And if you listen to the stories of what went on that set, I got this feeling that Michael Cimino was trying to do what Kubrick did by doing take after take after take after take after take, and being so meticulous and so this and so that until it drove everybody crazy.
Unfortunately, that wasn't Michael Camino's style,
That was
and
not his style, and he's not Kubrick.
no,
because there's a point where people begin to trust Kubrick because he makes brilliant films.
Hmm.
And I think that
Camino had
I've
the Deer
always
Hunter.
wondered if that was what was on his mind, what was
Might
on
have been.
Cimino's mind when he's
Might have
making
been.
Heaven's Gate, because it just uh, destroyed his career.
Oh yeah.
And I'm thinking, you're not Kubrick.
Right.
Nobody ever will be.
No. It's
Um,
like
and nobody really ever knows what went on in Kubrick's mind,
no.
because
The
Kubrick didn't really grant it interviews.
he didn't really grant interviews. I actually have a book of Stanley Kubrick interviews, and what would happen is when he would talk to the press, which he had resigned from the press um, pretty much after A Clockwork Orange, and was blamed for this violent uptick in Britain, and it's still banned there on his orders.
Yeah,
Um, After that, he stopped doing interviews because he didn't want to talk about A Clockwork Orange and the violence that it was blamed for. Even though it came out in the same year, practically in the same month as Dirty Harry and Straw Dogs.
yeah.
So, talk about a violent month.
It
But
was the
he,
texture of the film. It
yeah,
was really the texture.
oh yeah. I mean, he got out of press stuff, and then he wanted to change his image because he found out what people thought of him, and he started granting interviews before Eyes Wide Shut came out. And he was actively wanted to change his persona, but when he would do written interviews, there would be a clause in the contract for doing the interview that he had to be sent his answers back so that he could rewrite them and make them exactly what he wanted that wouldn't be off the cuff.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow,
So
that
when
is
they were
amazing.
done, he got sent the transcript, and then he would reread the questions, and then he would write out his answers after thinking about them, and then he would send it back, and then that's what could be published.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And if you watch something like there was a documentary about an hour long called Stanley Kubrick's Boxes,
Mhm.
um, that detailed after his death they opened up the archives that were at his home. Like they would have to build sheds to put all of this research material in
Yeah,
for each movie. And I read a book by the guy that started off as his driver, and then became like his everything for a long time. Emilio D'Agostino, I think. He was an Italian guy, and he said that he had to like categorize all this stuff, and there were thousands of pictures of mountain resorts that he went through before he found what he thought the Overlook should look like. And it's
yeah.
actually a something in Oregon,
Mhm.
a hotel in Oregon. All those shots going up to the hotel, the exteriors of the hotel, all of those exteriors that are done with the helicopter and everything, they're all second unit. He
Yeah.
didn't do a single thing with it, but his influence is there. And
Well, I
it just,
I know. I'm sorry.
that's right.
Sorry. I know that Stephen King, where this book came from, was he was staying in a hotel, oddly named the Stanley Hotel, and he had the idea for this book. And but the hotel that he had in mind for the book, and the one that appears in the miniseries, is very inviting. It's very open. It almost looks very comfortable. The thing about this hotel in the movie is that it looks creepy.
Hmm.
It looks like a place you don't want to go here.
Right,
You
right,
know,
right, right.
you see it. It looks like it is stuck back in the mountain. It's behind this huge mountain peak.
Hmm.
There's snow on it. It's gray and
Hmm.
drab. It looks like it's hiding away from the world.
Hmm.
So that exterior is perfect.
Yeah.
because it masks it's a perfect cover for the interior, which is very oppressive.
Yes.
There's nothing comfortable about this hotel.
No. 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 No.
You look at the lobby when he comes in. You look at the lobby and you see all of these chairs and these couches and everything. It looks like a waiting room,
Right. 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 Right.
and then every room looks like a waiting room.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
has that furniture that is not meant for comfort.
Right.
It's
It's
meant to
it's
look a certain way.
right. It's all there for aesthetics and not for comfort.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever go into just your average hotel, your average hotel chain, La Quinta or Holiday Inn or something like that, and you sit on the couch, you realize the couch is not made for comfort.
No.
It's very stiff. It's very
Yes.
uncomfortable. And if you try to sleep on it, God help if you ever try to
Oh.
sleep on one of those things. That's what this place looks like. It doesn't look fit for guests. When you see the beds, when they come in, then they first come in, the beds with the mattresses rolled up, you realize
Mm-hmm.
they're old spring bed frames,
Mm-hmm.
and they just look. And again, when I was talking about the opening shot, you don't want to go here. It never looks like a place you would want to be.
Right. 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 Right.
And uh, what's interesting is I was thinking about this while watching it the other night. Is that Kubrick, I think, was tapped into how our brains are wired.
Yeah.
Because one of the things to note about this film that's so interesting is that it taps into that idea that there are certain places that we go that look off, that look unusual
Mm-hmm.
when people are not there.
Right.
A shopping mall, for example. I used to work in a mall after hours.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk out into the mall and there's nobody there.
Right.
The lights are off. There's the lights are off. And it's a place where people should be.
Right. And that's something that he did a lot of throughout his career. Um, one of the shots in Eyes Wide Shut, it's like a kind of an upper angle shot in the doctor's office.
Right.
It's kind of bowed because it's a wide angle lens, but it's not even. It's not flat out, so it kind of it kind of goes in on the sides and makes it more like a fisheye, but it's dark. There's like lighting from the Christmas tree, and it's just this weird, just dead space.
Yeah.
And he did that a lot. He would fill in. He would just use a lot of negative space, which this whole hotel is.
Yeah.
Um,
And why it's so interesting when he's riding that big wheel around because um, it's so spaced out that there you're sitting there thinking he should be knocking stuff over.
yeah,
In any luxury hotel, he would be knocking stuff over. But there's so much room for him to move because
hmm,
everything is so spaced out, because
right,
everything is so open. And it again doesn't look like it should
right,
in our
right, right,
brain.
right.
I stayed in a hotel last month. My wife and I went to Ohio, and we were staying in a hotel, and we got there very very late. And I went out because we came in and we were going to have dinner. We we didn't have anything to drink, so I went out looking for a Coke machine because if you got it at the counter, it was about $5. So I went out looking for a Coke machine. Well, we were on the first floor, so I go up and I walk up the stairs and I walk down the hallway and there's no Coke machine. This is 3 floors, and I go up on the third floor. The third floor is being remodeled,
Oh no.
and as I'm walking through the hallway, I see rooms that are empty,
Uh huh.
rooms that have bed frames kind of standing up on their ends, and they're
Mm-hmm.
stacked up like folding chairs.
Mm-hmm.
And I see lamps. I just see all these different things that you, well, of course, you're a guest. You're not supposed to see, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just interesting to see a place where there should be people. You're expecting an aesthetic, but it's not there. That's the thing here. That aesthetic is not there.
Right.
And I think that's part of what drives the haunting part of this,
Yeah.
because it's not, it doesn't feel personable. It doesn't
Right.
feel
Because you're
human.
used to seeing a resort or a hotel teeming with life, at
Yeah.
least with some people in it. Um,
Hmm.
but when it's just that there's three people
Yeah.
in this massive thing that the interiors could not possibly fit into the exterior that we see.
I'd get
Especially
lost in
the
place,
the
honestly.
gold the gold room is
Hmm.
too big for the actual size of the actual hotel exterior that they
Right, because if you're
used.
looking at the outside of it, you're thinking, how did all this space fit in here?
It
Because it
wouldn't.
doesn't look that big.
Right. It's like
It's like
it's
Flintstone's house.
right. Yeah. I mean, it's like the ghosts made it into a Time Lord technology and is bigger on the inside.
Yeah.
Um,
So I
but
wanted to ask you a question. I've
yeah,
asked you this question before, but I was could you take this job?
you know, when I hadn't seen the movie for a couple of years, I said yes. Now that I've seen it 1.5 times in the last 24 hours, no,
I
because
don't
I
think this job. I don't think this job would exist
no, I mean I forgot that it went from October, the end of October
to
to the
me.
beginning of May. Like I forgot that it was really like a 5 month stretch, 7 month stretch, 7 month stretch, because it's like
Half a year.
yeah, it's about a 6 month stretch, and it's like by myself. Oh my god, like without you know any of the creature comforts that we've gotten used to now, like
Yeah.
trying to do that with just the television.
Yeah.
There's no
Oh my God.
VCR.
Ugh.
There would just be books, whatever programming was on, and at like with Poltergeist, there would be a time where that would shut off.
Yeah.
No cable, it was just aerial. So, you had 3 to 5 channels if you could pick up the PBS channel. Um,
Up there in a snowstorm, I'm surprised she actually got
I know
any
anything at
anything,
all. And
because
then
they're
like,
watching, because she's sitting there and she's watching Summer '42, and
mm-hmm,
the TV is so clear,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and it's like there's no, because back then it would have been she would not have gotten a reception in a snowstorm like that. I mean, um, it's interesting. I don't think this job would exist today, and if it did, you probably wouldn't have um, one person doing it. You would
No,
probably have a team of about 7 or 8 people
right.
doing this job. The boilers, probably you would have automatic. It would be automatic, and it would bleed itself.
Yeah, or they would
But
be updated to the point where they didn't need that kind of maintenance.
right, right. But basically, I mean, aside from the boilers, he's also there to take care of basic maintenance and keep the hotel from being
Get
beaten down by the elements.
right, right, right. So that they can open
But
on time.
so they can open them. Yeah, and the thing is, if I were in this hotel by myself, if I wasn't married, I could take this job if I had the internet,
Mm-hmm.
cell service,
Mm-hmm.
but I know how my brain works. I would be in my room with the door shut every night by 7 o'clock because I know how my brain works after a certain time, particularly in a large open space like that. I would start seeing things, and but like I said, I would cozy up after 7 in my room with my internet. I could get a lot of writing done, and that's one thing.
Sure.
That's one thing that drove me crazy about this movie is I felt bad for Jack that he wasn't getting any writing done.
Yeah, I know.
You and I are writers. We know this.
Yeah. This movie more than just about any other movie for writers. A lot of film uh, people will turn to something like Barton Fink, but this and Wonder Boys are the two movies for writers who know what it's like to stare at the blank page or the cursor blinking on
Yeah.
on
No, there
nothing
is
but the
nothing. Let
title.
me let me tell you. Let me tell you something about writers. If you don't know, if you're not a writer, let me tell you something about writers. There is nothing worse in this world than for a writer to finally have time to write and sit down and discover they have nothing to write. That is the worst thing that can happen to a writer. You finally get time and you sit down and your fingers are just not moving.
The other torture is that you have a ton to write,
Hmm.
but you know how much time you have.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, I can get to this, and then you
Yeah. I got 6 months. Yeah.
and then you push it off to do something else, like throw a ball against the wall, or read a book,
Let
or
me
watch
tell
a
you
movie.
something. That shot. Let me tell you something. That shot where you see the typewriter and it backs up, and you see him in the room behind it throwing the tennis ball against the wall.
Yeah,
We get that.
yeah, oh yeah, oh
We
yeah.
get that. Trust me.
That
This is
that
a.
hits that hits on a real personal level.
You want to talk about the horrors of this film? The horrors of this film really are for us are that
Yes.
having all the time in the world to write and not knowing what to write. And it's it's deadening because you'll just sit there and type anything.
Hmm.
The worst thing, and also, and this happens to me, is that I'll sit down to write, and then I'll go look up something on the internet, and then look up something else, and
And then there
something else,
goes an
and
hour.
something else, and there goes an hour.
Yeah.
Trust me, we are writers. I write. You write for TalkMovieToMe.com. I write for ArmchairCinema.com. And there are times when I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I got nothing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got
And
half-written
there's
reviews. I got a file of half-written reviews on my computer.
I have some that I've done the title,
Yeah,
the year, and what star rating I would give it, and then spaces down to start writing, and then I have a dozen. Just here's the title, here's what I thought of it. Now what? It's
yeah.
like
And I'm
it's
sitting
like at
there
the
the
end
other
of
night and
Finding
I'm like,
Nemo.
I'm sitting there. It's what is it? Mid-October. I'm sitting there the other night. I really should finish my review for it.
I just saw the Lego Ninjago movie, and I had it open. I was ready to go, and I still haven't. I
One thing you
mean,
should know about movie reviews. One thing you got, folks, if you're listening, one thing you really need to know about movie reviews. If you don't write them right away,
you're just not gonna.
you're just not going to. You have to write it as soon as you can because if you don't, it's forget about it.
And it's not even that you forget the movie. It's just that it's like other stuff starts to happen. It's like, well, the timeliness of this is past. I might as well just not do it. And
Right.
like, and if you're working on other things,
Yeah.
forget it. Like if you've visited my site recently, I think the last thing I posted, we're recording this in mid October. The last thing I have up there was probably from August. I think it was Wonder Woman. Um,
Yeah.
which is terrible.
I'm doing
Like,
a I'm doing a Best Picture project in which I'm writing every other day from September until the Oscars in March. Uh, a review, a short capsule review of every best film that ever won Best Picture. And the project is moving along smoothly, but I'm not finished with it. Because every time I sit down to write, I start playing Scrabble. I start playing Zork. I start playing something else. And it's like, I should really be writing. And I
oh
know
yeah.
that if this were a normal film, if this were not a horror film, I know, I know absolutely he would never get this play written.
No.
He would not get this play written
Is he writing a
because
play or a novel?
he's writing a play.
Oh.
In the movie, he says he's outlining a writing project.
Right.
Now that's according to the book. According to the book, he's actually writing a play. But again, that thing where he sits down and he types in all kinds of weird configurations.
The formatting thing was amazing.
Yeah,
When you're
especially the diamond
when
pattern.
she's looking through it and it's all the same thing, but it's cut in, like you can see where if it were real things, it would like be a paragraph of description and then it cuts in to a paragraph of dialogue. It's like you can see it. You can see everything, and then there's like the triangle and
Diamond
just
pattern.
all just the yeah the diamond pattern, all those all just the different formatting things that like that would take up so much time. That was the equivalent of playing whatever matching game or whatever of typewriter
You're not typing.
days.
You're not working. You're just playing with the typewriter.
Right. Yes, exactly. You're
And it's
figuring
on
out
reams and
you're
reams and
figuring
reams of
out
paper.
it's the equivalent of figuring out how to spell boob on a calculator. Like
Yeah. But she goes through it, and here's the thing: I never really figured out why she was scared by that. If my wife had found out that I had spent 3 months sitting in front of the typewriter typing this in all configurations, she wouldn't be scared. She'd be pissed.
cuz that is that has got to be like that file thing, that box that he's got, there's got to be like 500 pages
Because she keeps
of
going
just
through it and going through it
yeah,
and going through it.
all work and no play, and that's his done pile.
Yeah.
Like like I
Yeah.
mean, I would get creeped out personally if I came across that and it's like, "Oh, you've just been spending every day for hours a day going crazy." Like that's what this means. Maybe he actually thinks that there's a story there.
Yeah.
What do you think of it? It's like, do you know that you're not writing anything? Do you know that?
Well, crazy people don't generally work in logic, Doug. I
Well,
mean, let's
it's like
face
the
it.
catch-22 is you can get kicked out of the army if you're insane, but you won't realize that you're insane unless you're sane because you won't know the difference. So if you're sane enough to say I'm crazy, then you're sane enough to stay in the army, but if you're too insane, you won't want to leave. That's the
If you're sane
catch-22.
enough to know what a Section 8 is, you don't get one.
Right, exactly. But if you're crazy enough to need one, you won't ask for one because you want to stay where you are. That's the whole. Oh, I love Joseph Heller.
Uh, and that's one of the reasons I love this movie because it gets crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier the further down the labyrinth it goes.
mm-hmm.
And it's a horror movie, but it's also got these weird funny moments, and I love, absolutely love the scene where he's chopping the door down and he's doing all of the Jack Nicholson stuff, little pigs, let me come in, and
Yeah.
all of that stuff. And he's chopping the door down, but you realize when you get back down to the pragmatic level, it's horrible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's
It's
doing
terrifying.
all of this
but
It's
it's
4 minutes
funny.
like.
And then I'm glad that you brought that back up because I did want to talk the I love that because yes, it's Nicholson being Nicholson, but the thing that I love about it is when you're watching it, the whole movie was shot on a steady cam.
Yeah.
And when he's chopping the door to the apartment and then the bathroom door,
Hmm.
the way that the operator does it is it follows the axe.
Yeah.
So the axe is literally driving the momentum of the scene.
Hmm.
So it goes back, and then when he pitches forward, the camera goes at the same speed and stops when it hits the door, and then it goes back. It's like you are being propelled, and the movie and the camera are being propelled by this action of chopping, which
Yeah.
is a really, really awesome visual, and it puts you right there. But at the same time, it distances you. Um, I have always kind of thought that Kubrick shared a few things with Orson Welles.
Hmm.
Orson Welles was a student of Bertolt Brecht, who was a play director who insisted that you didn't want your audience to be so wrapped up that they didn't know that they were watching a play. You had to
Yeah.
make it so that they knew that they were watching a play to create some distance. And when you watch an Orson Welles film, a lot of his stuff is designed to make you know that you're watching a movie. Even if you're getting caught up in everything, you know that what you're watching isn't real. And Kubrick did the same thing. A lot of people blame him for being cold and distant, but really, he's really quite warm throughout his stuff. But he wants to put up a barrier between you and what he's showing you because a lot of what he's showing you
Hmm.
is the worst of humanity.
Right.
If you're watching Doctor Strangelove, yes, it's funny, but it's also terrifying because that's the end of the world. A
Right.
Clockwork Orange, it's so distasteful that he doesn't want you to get in and associate with these people. He wants a distance so that he can show you the awfulness but not have you risk becoming too emotionally involved with these people because they're terrible people.
Right.
It's like he cares
And
about
you
you
feel
so much he
something,
doesn't want you to
and
get
you feel,
hurt.
and you feel something for those recruits
Yeah.
in the beginning of Full Metal Jacket. You feel something for Private Joker. You feel something for Private Pile.
Mm-hmm.
But then you are under the realization of what they are being asked to do, or what they're volunteering to do,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because they're going to war. They're
Right.
going to get killed,
Right.
you know. But they have to go through this dehumanization
And if they
process.
don't get killed, they're going to have to kill
Right.
so that
Right.
they don't get killed. It's yeah.
That's another movie.
It's
We're going to have to do. We're going to do an episode on that.
we're going to have to
But
do an
if
episode on a
if
lot of his stuff, but
dehumanization is a huge theme in his films,
yeah.
all the way through. Um, that the idea that of a process of a fairly normal person whose humanity is removed in some way.
Mm-hmm.
It happens in Clockwork Orange. It
Yeah.
happens here. It happens in Full Metal Jacket. In some ways, it happens in Eyes Wide Shut.
It happens in 2001.
It happens in 2001.
It happens in Barry Lyndon. It happens
In Lolita.
in Lolita, in The Killing, in Paths of Glory. I mean,
The larger world or something about it will pull the humanity out of you.
right. So it's something that and technology were the big things. Like Kubrick was loved new technology,
Uh-huh.
but he also kind of feared it. Like he was the first to adopt anything, pagers, uh, early cell phones, car phones, things like that. Like anything that was new, computers, anything, he would have it and try to understand it. But he also
Yeah,
realized the implications of them.
he had his eye on AI, um, but he never really thought that it was a possibility until he saw Jurassic
Right, and he also knew that with his filming style, he would need to produce it and maybe write it, but he couldn't direct it because he would take too long and the kid would age.
Yeah,
Which is what happened here. You can actually see Danny Lloyd getting older.
yeah.
Because the shoot took like 250 days. And
The
like you
uh,
could
the
see him.
scene where the scene where he's sitting at the table with Scatman Crothers, and the scene where he's running around the edge maze, you can tell
Yeah.
there's some age that's been put on.
Right.
And I love that scene, by the way. Again, the magician's trick. That scene, by the way, in the maze where he's running around and he's being chased by Jack,
Oh, yeah.
was shot in summertime,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all fake snow.
It's salt
Yeah.
and
So
styrofoam.
your brain is thinking you're looking at your brain is thinking you're looking at
Mid-December.
mid-December, but you're actually looking at like July.
Yeah, yeah.
And I love that scene at the end when he, because I think Danny remembered the way out of this place.
Oh, yeah. I think that he, with his Shining and with a lot of his stuff, he seems to have like an eidetic memory. It's just the
Because
the photographic memory.
he brought Jack. Jack is basically, when you get to it, is in the center of the maze.
Hmm.
If you notice,
He's
if you look
he's
carefully, he's in,
he's the Minotaur.
yeah. If you look carefully, they're in the center of the maze, and Jack is, when he's howling and he's running around, he's right there on the edges of the center.
Hmm.
And Danny does that the Last of the Mohicans thing where
He backtracks.
he backtracks,
Yeah.
and then he erases his footprints. What I don't get is, why didn't Jack just turn around and go back the other way?
Because he's lost his mind. He has devolved to the point where he is no longer even particularly verbal. He is
Yeah.
right. He is just this shell of a person that has been so whittled away and emptied by alcoholism and sobriety and these ghosts and whatever his ability might have been to for them to have come to him to be able to wheedle in the first place. Like Shelley Duvall, Wendy doesn't see them until they've basically been sucking the life out of Jack.
Yeah.
They can manifest then to anybody. But
I
originally,
can't remember if his manifestations start when he's in the bar or when he goes into the room, because I can't remember which comes first.
the bar comes first.
The bar comes first, and then the room, because he goes in the room and he sees that.
Oh, no, 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 no. Wait a minute. Oh, no.
Which I can't remember which one
He.
comes first.
I just
Because
watched it
he
too.
goes in.
I'm trying to remember if he goes to. No, She accuses him of hurting him, and then he goes and he finds the gold room because he's angry and he's punching the air. And then he goes, and then the manifestation starts, and then he goes to room 237 and sees the woman and has all
Yeah.
that happen.
Now this again, going back to the book, the young woman was not there in the book.
Right, right, right.
The old lady was.
Mm-hmm.
He saw her in the bathtub, and he kind of got scared and ran out. There was no chasing him out. He just ran out. I think it works better in the movie, but the
Because
deliberate pace, where someone in any other movie will take 2 seconds to walk across the room, Stanley Kubrick will give them 30, 40 seconds.
right, yes.
How long does it take her to get out of that bathtub? It's at least a minute for her to get out of that bathtub. And that's the thing I love about Kubrick, is his deliberate pace.
Yeah,
Takes you time for the scene to get under your skin a little bit, and it's not time for you to consider what you're looking at.
mm-hmm.
Time to consider the moment. And in this case, when she's coming up out of the bathtub and she's moving very slowly, it's very seductive.
Yeah.
And then when he sees the old lady, it gets really fast because he's trying to get out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
It's that kind of pacing. I don't think any other, very few filmmakers have this kind of pacing.
Right. No.
And I
No.
love that about his work.
Kubrick knew what he wanted,
Yeah.
and he knew how to get it. And again, I'll compare him to Orson Welles. It's like he would take that time to figure out what he wanted so that he would get it. He didn't necessarily know what he wanted, but he knew it when he saw it. And he would take something and he would uh, improvise around or rewrite something so that he could get what eventually he wanted out of the performance, out of the camera move, out of the take. And if something couldn't be done,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't accept that it couldn't be done. He would say, well, we just need to do it like this or this, or he would try out different setups. And only after he had exhausted everything he could do would he then say, well, I guess this can't be done the way I want it to be done.
Right.
Orson Welles was the same way. He would say, nope, I want it done like this. And then he would try every setup, including whatever the camera person said. And he goes, nope, it's not going to happen. And then the camera person would say, well, we could do it like this and this. And he goes, nope, that's a cheat. That's not how I want it. It's not going to work. Let's just scrap the shot and move on to something else. Like,
Well, before we close the door on the Overlook Hotel, there is one issue I want to talk about, and
yeah.
that's the ending. Because the original ending to this movie, which is footage that apparently has been lost. Have you heard about this?
No.
There originally was an ending on this movie. When it first came out, it was released. This film was released in, I think, L.A. and New York. The key markets.
Right.
After you see Jack sitting in the snow,
Mm-hmm.
frozen to death, he looks like the chef from You Can't Do That on Television.
He
He's
does.
sitting in the snow. After that, it cuts to a hospital. Wendy is in hospital bed, just traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
Danny is Danny is there, and he's talking to the nurses. Ullman comes in, wearing this weird kind of fur-lined coat, gives Danny the tennis ball that Jack was throwing around, and says, "Let's just keep this between us."
Ooh.
It's some kind of connection that gave the indication that Ullman was in on it. And when the movie premiered, it ran for 1 week with that addendum on it.
Hmm.
And when he gives him the tennis ball and he says that, then it goes to the long shot of the picture with Jack in it.
Okay.
When this film played for a week in New York and L.A., that footage was on it. And apparently Kubrick called the theaters that were playing it and asked them to cut that footage. This is back when you could do that.
Yeah.
Asked them to cut that ending off. So that was the only way you could ever have seen that footage, was
Mm-hmm.
if you happened to see it that first week.
Hmm.
And that footage is now missing. There are photographs that exist of it, but and the script, and there's the script portion of it exists too.
Right.
Having read it, I don't think the movie needs it.
No.
I really don't think this movie needs anything else.
There's so much in it.
There's so freaking much in it. It doesn't need anything else, man.
It's so long.
Yeah,
It's one of the
yeah,
longest horror movies I can think of.
yeah,
Because most of the
yeah.
time they want to do it like horror is like comedy. It doesn't typically play out over a long period of time, which is why most horror movies are at the
90 minutes.
most maybe 2 hours. Um, and that's if there's a lot of character development.
Yeah,
Whereas,
I always say that horror is an interesting animal, because horror is a heightened version of the real world with the lights turned off.
Right, right, right.
And it's you always need a gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
You need a gimmick to play with, and then once again, you need a gimmick to play with, and then you need and most horror filmmakers just stick with the gimmick. Then you have movies like The Shining, in which you have a brilliant director who wants to make it something more
Mm-hmm.
and make it an artistic, make it very much more artistic.
Right.
Those are the ones we remember, I think.
Yeah.
I love The Shining. It's not my favorite horror.
I do too. It's
I can punch holes in it. I think there are problems with it. There are problems when I'm watching it because as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, "Wow, that scene's already here."
right.
I'm thinking, "Wow, we're already at that scene."
Right.
You know, because the scene runs longer in your brain than it does on the screen.
yeah, and he does that on purpose too.
Yeah, he does that on purpose. But anyway, I guess we should wrap this up.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations?
Oh, well, in terms of horror, um, there's really not much like this. The the only thing that I could really say is check out other Kubrick because his stuff got scary even when it wasn't a horror movie.
Right.
Um, Doctor
His stuff was
Strangelove,
already
yeah, Doctor Strangelove was the funniest horror movie I've ever seen because it's the end of the world, but
right.
it's hilarious. Full Metal Jacket is the horror of war with some humor in it and some, you know, and the anything that he did could be interpreted as some kind of a horror movie. Um, because
Eyes
of
Wide
that,
Shut.
yeah, oh, the horrors of marriage.
The horrors of mistrust in marriage,
yes.
marital infidelity.
And you know, uh, when it comes to horror movies that are in this vein, I know I brought it up before, but the Japanese movie Houseu from '77, um, again, haunting, crazy, weirdness. It's it fits in with this one as much as it does with Poltergeist or something like that as an antithesis to Poltergeist. It's very it's like The Shining in Japan, only
Yeah.
it's
Well, and Spielberg and Kubrick, as I said before, stand on completely opposite ends of each other when it
yeah.
comes to any kind of style or. I don't mean that as a criticism on either part, but they're just completely different filmmakers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Spielberg is very open about his work. Kubrick is not.
Right.
Spielberg's very warm in his work. Kubrick is not. That's why I brought up Poltergeist several times because that's a very warm family. This is a very cold family.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And you know, I'm trying to think because the only thing now that we've been talking about Kubrick and The Shining for 2 hours, all I can think about is Stanley Kubrick. So my recommend my recommendations are kind of tanked as a result of that. Because I was trying to think of a funny horror movie to watch, something like that was also like a haunted house, like. And now Bob Hope in The Ghost Breakers
Yeah.
is a fun one. Don Knotts in The Ghost of Mr. Chicken is it's really kind of a terrible movie, but it is probably his best movie.
Yeah.
That and The Incredible Mr. Limpet. Um, so I mean, it's just like a counterpoint, like to watch something because this has shock value and it has mental terror.
Yeah.
The only other picture that I can think of that does that in equal measure with equal talent is The Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. Only
So,
that's a much more straightforward.
oh sure, sure,
It's a much more straightforward. I think that movie's more drama than it is horror.
yeah, oh
Um,
absolutely, but there's still some shocking, terrifying
Terrible things in it.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where I would go. How about you?
Well, if I had, there is no movie in the world that I could ever couple with this that wasn't directed by Stanley Kubrick. but I'm
There's
going to
no
say
double
that
bill outside of
there's
Stanley
no
Kubrick to
double
do.
bill with this. The
It's
only
like,
films that I could ever think of are the movies that I've already talked about. I love movies like this, movies that are just so weird and bombastic. Um, we talked about two of them on this show, Under the
mm-hmm,
Skin and It Follows.
mm-hmm.
And if you really want a double bill, watch this and watch Poltergeist because you'll see two opposite ends of the spectrum. They're so similar.
Mm-hmm.
This and Poltergeist are so similar because they're so different. They're both about a family being terrorized. They're both about a family in a location that's haunted.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird thing. It's a weird juxtaposition. If you want to watch any kind of double bill, watch that.
Yeah.
I'm going to recommend two things. One, I want to recommend absolutely, if you haven't seen it, Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures.
That is such an excellent documentary.
If you haven't, it should surprise no one that the film runs as long as one of his films.
It does.
It is 2.5 hours long, but if you love Kubrick, it's fascinating.
It's an
It's a
excellent.
journey through his life told by those who knew him,
Mm-hmm.
those who worked with him, those who were frustrated by him,
Mm-hmm.
and
It has interviews with his wife Christiane,
mhm,
his brother-in-law, who was also his producer from the early '70s until the end, Jan Harlan.
yeah.
Um, his daughters. It's yeah. It's
Uh, it's narrated
actors.
by Tom Cruise, who that kind of gets on my nerves because I get irritated with Tom Cruise because he kind of can get full of himself.
Yeah.
I'm not a Tom Cruise. I'm a fan of Tom Cruise movies, but the public man I get irritated by.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm going to recommend is Room 237.
Mm.
If you really want to see how insane people can get over
Oh.
one movie, this is the movie to do it. Basically, what it is it's a documentary based around five very crazy people who sat and spent all of their time watching this movie. And they have picked it apart and picked it apart and picked it apart and picked it apart
And
until they have found references to the idea that he's making a statement about the Holocaust.
mm-hmm.
This movie was his admission that he filmed the moon landing.
Right.
That an overturned truck scene in the movie is his message to Stephen King that I screwed up your book. And it's fascinating because there are people. There's one person in this movie who actually drew the Overlook's floor plan based on the movie.
Oh.
It's fascinating. It's not great,
It's
but it's
such a
fascinating.
weird little. It's a frustrating movie because
It can get
you're
frustrating.
sitting there watching it like, why are how where did these people come up with that? Like,
But you know what?
it's
I told you off mic. I'm such a Godfather fan that I once spent an evening doing an internet search trying to find out what Johnny Fontaine's war movie was called. I mean, so I get it. I get it. But it's not like I say. It's not great. It's not
no.
insight. It doesn't give you a lot of insights. But it's interesting. It's interesting the way people will take one movie and
Mm-hmm.
break it apart. Especially be Kubrick, who left his movie so open that you're sitting there and you're just like, you could interpret them into anything.
Anything at all from I would say probably from Lolita on. I would say that anything can be pulled and his movies could be manipulated into whatever you want to believe they are.
And it's
Um,
because he didn't talk about his work.
right? Yeah. He let his work speak for itself, and you bringing up Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures. I do have another recommendation. It was if you can find it. I don't. I think it was on a pay channel years ago. It's called Stanley Kubrick's Boxes. It's only about an hour long, and it talks about um, when Christiane Kubrick opened up the archives on the house's grounds to a journalist or something, and he made a documentary about it, going through this years and years worth of saved research for
Right.
each movie. Because I know when he was doing Napoleon, he read, and this is not an exaggeration, every single book ever written that survived about Napoleon. He had an entire library full of books on Napoleon.
Yeah.
So the level and intensity of research that he did for his movies, and he kept everything. Everything. And so they're in these little sheds or in a garage or in something, and this guy goes through it, and he made this film out of going through this old archived material, maybe 10 years after Kubrick died in 1999. Fascinating little documentary. So I would recommend that, and I think that we are going to have to close the doors on the Overlook Hotel, and because we could probably keep talking about this for another 2 hours, and so I just want to say thank you very much for listening to our Shocktober choices, our three ghost stories, uh, one paranormal and one straight up homicidal maniac.
And we are going to go from the pumpkins to the turkeys.
Oh my! So next week we are doing Jerry's pick for Turkey Month, the kickoff Turkey Month, with the two God's Not Dead movies, which, well,
We're
we'll
going to
listen to
go
that one.
through the month of November talking about some of the worst movies
Just
we've ever seen.
terrible movies. After that, we're doing my pick, which is Dreamcatcher, which I think is the single worst movie of the early 2000s. Then we are switching over to Sweet November
You're going to love that one.
with Keanu
all I
Reeves
got
and
to say
Charlize
is
Theron from
all I
what,
got to say is
97?
automatic dishwashers.
It's and then to round out the month, we're doing my pick of M. Night Shyamalan's Turn into Darkness and Despair, The Village,
Oh,
which
mother of God.
and we'll give you December's when we get a little closer to that. So we thank you once again. Um, You can find all of our episodes up to this point at our YouTube page, Pod Bay Doors Podcast, and our WordPress page, www.thepodbaydorspodcast.wordpress.com. I remembered all of it, Jerry. You can find my writings when I get to do them at talkmovietome.com. You can find me on Twitter at talkmovietome1. You can find Jerry's much more frequent writings on armchaircinema.com and armchairoscars.com. You can find him at armchaircma on Twitter. And I'd like to thank you once again. Give us your likes, your comments, any suggestions or recommendations that you have for us in the coming new year, because we're booked out through January 1st, but after that we've got an open schedule so far. But you better act quick because we can fill that up real fast. And we thank you once again for listening. Uh, the Pod Bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
Bye.